guys? Well, welcome back to National Tiger Sanctuary. Today we have another one of the 4 or 5 different species of exotic felids that live here on the sanctuary. And this, for us here in North America, is one of the more important ones, and that is our cougar. Now, depending on where you guys come from, you might know this animal as a slightly different title. Cougar is its technically accepted title. However, myself coming from the Midwest, I know this is a mountain lion. Puma is another very common title to hear for this animal. Catamount, Florida panther, ghost cat, Banshee. Come here. Come here. You want over there? These are all titles that actually do apply to this one animal. This cat specifically, we all know as Banshee. She is one of the 2 cougars that live here on the sanctuary. Now, this is a really interesting cat and a very important one for us because this is one of our natives here in the Americas. This cat can actually be found everywhere from the Yukon up in Canada all the way down to the Andes of South America. They actually have the largest natural range of terrestrial mammals in the American continent. So it's a very, very interesting species. Now, much like the species we talked about last week with our leopards, this cat is actually very, very similar to that animal. But even though we do hear a lot of very similar titles, the mountain lion, panther, things of that nature, she is actually a very distant relative of the leopards. This cat is actually more closely related to your domestic house cat than the leopards themselves. So, but because of the evolutionary trait that they took, or kind of trends that they followed, they did evolve to actually look very similar, to act very similar, and to have very, very similar overall behaviors and mannerisms in the wild. Banshee is a cat that is not always the most social cat, so I'm going to try to entice her with as many snacks as I can today to try to keep her attention with us. She loves her snacks. But with this cat, a lot like the leopards that we talked about last week, it is a very generalist predator. This is a cat that, again, like the leopards, are going to hunt anything from insects, rodents, up to the large ungulates. Depending on where they are found within their range, they can either be the apex predator or a lower class predator, depending on what other animals are existing. Now, they are the second largest cat within the Americas. The jaguar is a larger species, but this is the 4th largest species of big cat in the world. Lions, tigers, jaguars, and mountain lions are the lions, tigers, and jaguars, the only 3 in front of them. But depending on where you see them in the range, they're going to scale anywhere from 60 pounds upwards of 200 to 250 pounds. So these cats do have a very wide range. Banshee here is about 100 pounds, which is pretty average for female cats in this area, especially within their native range within the North America. Mountain lions likely evolved, their ancestors likely evolved within Asia and moved over into North America and throughout the Bering Land Bridge back about 8 million years ago. So relative-wise, they actually are very closely related to cheetahs. That's going to be the closest relative they have within the exotic felid clade. But these cats are really cool because they are not classified as big cats. Big cats, what we classify a big cat as is an animal that can roar, that has the ability to roar. Banshee, you want another snack? Come here. You want this? You gotta come back out. So this cat cannot roar like your lions and tigers, but the really cool thing about them is they can both purr and meow, much like your house cat. So Banshee can purr. Very little rare to hear her on occasion. She will when you catch her off guard sometimes when she's in a really good mood out in the sun. You can usually hear her purring a little bit. But again, being one of our native predators here in North America, they are a very, very important animal for us. Historically, this was an animal that would not only obviously fill that apex predator role, but actually is a very important ecological factor in that they actually help reduce a lot of the nuisance prey animals, things like deer or rabbit. They're very, very good at not only obviously hunting those animals, but actually changing the overall pattern of those animals to the point where they're not breeding as frequently. You're not going to see as high of populations. So you actually see an overall big impact when these animals are removed from their native habitat, not only on the prey species, but actually on the landscape itself, because those prey species have very heavy impacts within the vegetation, the foliage, and that can affect the landscape and things of that nature. So this is a very important animal for us here in North America. Unfortunately, we did see a very large decrease in their population early on in colonial American history, obviously. this is an animal that people do see as a threat to livestock and things of that nature. But in reality, this is a cat that typically tries to avoid people at all costs. This is an animal that is very solitary. In the wild, they will not interact with each other outside of mating season and when females have cubs, and they are nocturnal and crepuscular. And so because of that, people typically do not see these cats. They try to avoid people as much as possible. Now, some of these animals, obviously, we are having to deal with some of the issues of these cats moving, or not necessarily the cats moving in, but us moving into their territory. So we are unfortunately hearing some incidents of people coming in contact with these animals. And in all cases, these cats will always try to flee over fight. They're always going to try to get away from you before they try to do anything negative. Now, in the cases where you do hear of these animals attacking people, it's typically them being surprised. Someone walked up on them while hiking or doing something of that nature. But typically, like I said, this is an animal that will try to avoid people as much as possible. Now, one of the very interesting things, again, kind of going back to talking about our leopards, we typically hear one of the more common phrases to call this animal is a black panther. Like Midnight, the cat we talked about last week, that is a very common title for her. And as I discussed, Midnight is technically a black panther in that she was all black and is from the genus Panthera. Now, pumas, or the cougar, is actually not even in the genus Panthera, so calling her a panther to start with actually doesn't fit that moniker. And on top of that, the mountain lion is not known to actually have that melanistic trait like the leopards do. So they will actually never be black. It is very common to see them as a very dark brown color, and because they are active at low light conditions, a lot of people assume they are black. But Banshee is a pretty funny cat. She is one of our cats that unfortunately did originate in private ownership prior to arrival on the sanctuary. We were able to provide Banshee a home, and we definitely enjoyed it. She's actually a really cool cat for NTS because this is actually the first non-tiger that the NTS actually ever rescued, so she is a pretty cool cat in that sense for us. Now, Banshee's not the most social cat anymore. She's kind of realized that people are not as big. That's because, unfortunately, she doesn't get as many snacks as she used to, and she's realizing that it's not as interesting to come out and meet people as it used to be. But fortunately, since we are an open for tour, I can be a little bit more generous with the snacks today to kind of keep her attention. But I'm happy to start answering questions if you guys have any about Banshee or the mountain lions as a whole.
Do they hunt during the day or at night?
So they are going to be the hunting pattern will either be typically a nocturnal or crepuscular. So obviously nocturnal being at night or crepuscular being dawn and dusk.
What are you feeding her right now?
So right now she's just getting some chicken wings, some uncooked, obviously unprocessed, unseasoned chicken wings. Again, big cats are able to consume bone and all, so she has a very simple and short digestive system that allows her to process the bones with no issue, and it is a good source of calcium for her.
How old is she?
So, think now. Banshee is going to be 13 years old this year. 13 or 14. I'd actually have to look. I can't remember off the top of my head.
How high can they jump?
So much like the leopard, you're going to see upwards of 10 plus feet easily. They can run 40 to 50 miles an hour. So again, very, very athletic animal. Much like the leopards, again, you're seeing a wide range of hunting patterns utilizing these different the physical abilities of this cat. But typically, this is an ambush predator. They will lie in wait and then run things to the ground very quickly. But much like the leopards, again, this is a climbing cat, so they do spend a lot of time in the trees. That is, again, because they are coexisting with bears, jaguars, wolves, coyotes that will try to take their prey for them and can make them prey themselves.
Aaron wants to know how long they live.
So in the wild, you're going to see average life expectancy anywhere from 8 to 13 to 14 years old. In captivity, you can easily see in a good home with great medical care, animals like Banshee living up into their early to mid 20s.
Karen wants to know what her enrichments are.
So Banshee is an interesting cat. She is one of our animals that does not like letting people see her play. So you very, very rarely will see videos of Banshee playing or interacting with things. But just like all of our cats, Banshee, if I can get her attention and keep her while we're finishing up here. Come here, one more. You want a couple more pieces? Come here. You want a couple more pieces? Yeah, come here. So much like our other cats, all of our animals do have at least one physical enrichment item that will always be in their enclosure. So in Banshees, you can see she's got a bowling ball. She's got a smaller boomer ball on the other side of her enclosure over here. Those toys are always in Banshee's enclosure. They are until she physically destroys them. We will never take them out. But she also loves to play with things like boxes, cardboard, or any kind of cardboard tubes, paper, things of that nature. Again, it is very rare to get a chance to see Banshee play. She usually waits until we are gone to where she'll start to play with things. But it is typically pretty funny to watch her when you actually can catch her doing it.
Annie wants to know what the differences in personality and behavior between Banshee and Tiki are.
So Banshee and Tiki. So Tiki is the other mountain lion that lives on our sanctuary. Tiki is a cat that unfortunately did have a much harder time adapting to the sanctuary. It took her a lot longer to get used to being around people, get comfortable with people. But actually, in my time here, about 4 years, we've seen a drastic shift in Tiki's behavior. And though she is an older female, Tiki's an older cat, she has actually warmed up quite a bit. She does like to come out and see tours and interact with people, get snacks, and loves to see small children and dogs. That's one of her favorite things. Now, Banshee has lost a little of that. She's not as interested in people as she used to be. Again, we'll deal with some weight issues with Banshee due to her being spayed. She is spayed, and that, so we have to watch her weight very closely. So she doesn't get as many snacks on tour as she used to, and a lot of times what we see with cats like Banshee that no longer get those snacks, they start to lose that interest. They don't feel as interested to come out and see people. But for the most part, they're actually both relatively similar. They're both kind of cats that some days you come out here and they're being very sweet, would love to spend as much time with you as possible, and other days they could care less if you'd ever come out and see them again. So
Natalie wants to know what your favorite animal is at the sanctuary.
Oh, that's probably the hardest question to answer on the sanctuary in reality. Oh man, that's a hard one to answer. For me, I would have to probably say Stripey is definitely up there, one of our tigers that lives on the sanctuary, but Midnight's up there as well. They're all very, very important. Tiki, I have a very special relationship with as well, so that's a very difficult question to answer. It can change day by day, I think, depending on how the cats are treating me, basically.
Beverly wants to know what her native range is.
So, the native range for this cat is actually a very large one. They are found in all of the American continents, ranging from the Yukon of Canada all the way down to the Andes of South America. So a very, very large range. That is, again, why you likely hear as many regional titles for this animal as you do. Again, me growing up in the Midwest, this is a mountain lion to me, but technically she is a cougar.
Deanna wants to know, do they live more in the mountains or the forest?
They can really range. Again, just like the leopards a lot of the big cats, but specifically the leopards, they are incredibly adaptable. Again, you're going to see these animals occupying territory from anything from dense forest regions, like Missouri, like areas in the Midwest, even up into the mountains of Colorado, areas like that. So they are very adaptable. You will typically see changes and variation in size depending on their environment. The animals that live in the more open environments typically are going to be larger because they are hunting larger game, where the cats that reside more in the closed areas like forests and areas like that, you're going to see a smaller size for them.
Erin wants to know what her favorite food is.
Basically anything you give her. Banshee is one of our cats that really is not the most picky animal in the world. She likes to eat whatever you can provide to her. Again, because she is on a little bit of a diet, she thinks she needs more than she thinks she needs to get more than she actually does. But Banshee is not the pickiest cat in the world for sure.
Debbie wants to know how she ended up at the sanctuary.
So Banshee actually came to the sanctuary. Unfortunately, her previous owner had passed away in a car accident, and the family felt that we would be able to provide a better home for her, and we gladly accepted her, and we were happy to bring her in.
Annie wants to know if Banshee interacts with the other cats.
So with all of our cats, again, they are primarily solitary animals. They do live in their own habitat, so they do not coexist with other animals as far as in their own habitat unless they did arrive together. But Midnight and Banshee are neighbors, so they do live together or next door to each other in the backyard. And on random occasions, you will see them playing hide and seek and going out and kind of following each other around and interacting a little bit. So not on a day-to-day basis, but you will see on occasion them playing with each other.
Karen asked, you said you had issues with territory with the largest tiger. Do you experience that with the mountain lions or any of the other cats?
Just see if I can get her come back out.
Good.
There she is. That's a good As far as territory with these cats, again, territorial behavior with all of these animals, they are obviously all very, very territorial cats. Now, Banshee doesn't necessarily like when we go into her enclosure to clean it up. She is very, very tricky to get locked in her bedroom so we can go in. But as far as the territorial nature that I deal with like Harry and some of the other big males, I don't see that with Banshee as much. Actually, typically what we see is gender plays a large role on the sanctuary, where the male cats typically have a little bit bigger problem with me. A lot of the females are a little more comfortable with me just because that gender does play a big role.
Deanna wants to know if they go into human habitats.
So they do, obviously. This is a cat that because of they have such a large natural range, humans have started to actually go into their habitat because, again, these are animals that would pre-exist us as far as their native range. And so we have started to see encroachment onto their native habitats, encroachment and destruction of their territory. And unfortunately, that's one of the biggest concerns we have for this animal is habitat fragmentation and destruction as a whole. And so, unfortunately, we are seeing a higher rate of interaction between mountain lions and humans in recent history just due to the overall expansion of territory that humans are utilizing. But again, this is a cat that's going to do everything in its power to avoid people at all costs.
Emma wants to know what toys we give them to play with.
So depending on which cat, Banshee gets different sized balls, bowling balls, boomer balls, which are large plastic balls, cardboard tubes, cardboard boxes, different things of that nature. Come on, we got a couple more pieces. More pieces. Come on.
Sheila wants to know if we always spay or neuter the cats, and if so, why?
So we will not neuter male animals. There's really no need for it. Again, because our animals typically do not live with other animals, we don't necessarily have to take that measure. It can have a much heavier effect on the males, especially with your lions and things of that nature. Now, spaying cats is something that we will do as a precaution to prevent a lot of medical issues that can evolve in the female cats as they age. And so we do precautionary spays. It's not something we go out and do every day, but we do, if we have an opportunity. In case of Banshee, we actually had to do a pre-existing surgery, and while we were doing that, we went ahead and spayed her. It will eliminate any issue in the future of having any medical issues for her. So,
Victoria wants to know if the cats talk to each other at all across habitats.
So Banshee doesn't talk a whole lot anymore. So before being spayed, you used to hear her scream a lot, make a lot of her noises. After being spayed, she lost a little bit of that. So Banshee and Tiki, I've never really heard them talking to each other. You will hear the lions talk to each other. Even sometimes the tigers will kind of talk to each other back and forth. But Banshee's a pretty quiet cat. She doesn't really make a lot of noise in general.
Deanna asked how heavy their paws are.
Never fully weighed one myself. I know obviously it's going to range between which cat you're talking about. I can tell you size-wise, Banshee's paws are typically, I would say, her front paws. I've never been around her when she has been sedated, but I would guess about 3 inches in diameter, so about that large. When you're talking about Harry's paws, who I have felt, they're about the size of a dinner plate. And so you can imagine they're a little bit bigger. But Banshee's, her front paws are going to be much larger than the back, again, due to her predatory style. But I've never weighed them myself. So
this is a 3-part question.
Okay.
Beth Ann asks how many teeth she has, what do they typically hunt in the wild, and what are their predators?
So I would actually have to go count the number of teeth they have. I don't know that right off the top of my head. I do have a replica skull that I can do and answer you after the video. I can go in and get that answer for you. But as far as prey range, they can hunt a large variety of prey, obviously, depending on the habitat they're found in, the competition that they're going against. But anything from insects, rodents, up to large ungulates like your deer, even pigs, things of that nature. So you do see a very large prey range within these animals. And as far as predators that they face, you actually surprisingly will see quite a bit more than you would in other big cats. Anything from, again, this is an animal that will coexist with jaguars, so you're seeing another very large carnivore that they would coexist with. Gray wolves, the coyotes, grizzly bears, black bears, even things like alligators can be a predator for this animal. Now, again, they're very wily. They're going to avoid predators as much as possible, so that's not necessarily as big a risk for them. But they do coexist with a lot of other very large predatory animals.
Erin asked, how do you give her vet treatments?
So all of our cats, again, we do have, we work very, very closely with our veterinarian, and anytime we have to do any kind of medical hands-on work, our animals are going to be under sedation during that period, so we will sedate them so we can safely go in, work on our animals during that period, and then bring them back up once we are finished. If we need to provide any kind of medication, things like that, and if pill form, you just hide in a little piece of meat, and they take it pretty easily, so. Michael
asked, what time of year does Banshee typically explore her treehouse?
So usually you're going to see Banshee up in her treehouse in the summer. So Banshee, like Midnight, does have a vertical aspect of her habitat, as you kind of see up there. Banshee, you usually see her up there on the warmer months. Usually she goes up there to get a little break from the heat, get some breeze, but also because we are typically a little busier in the summer, that's where she goes to kind of avoid people. People don't typically know she's up there when she's hanging out up there.
Deanna asked how hard it is to get her to behave.
You really don't get Banshee to behave. You can usually get to work with her a little bit. As you can see, snacks are a very good incentive for Banshee. Banshee does like her snacks, but it's not something she does not listen to command. She is much like your house cat. When you tell her to do something, she just kind of looks at you and walks away.
Karen asked if all the workers are assigned animals.
Nope. So with our staff, again, we do work with a slightly smaller staff. Everyone is involved with working with every animal on the sanctuary. Again, each person has different relationships with each cat, and that's actually really important because, again, this cat doesn't tell you it's ever sick. They don't really show signs of illness, and it's not an animal you can just load up in a dog cage and take up to the vet. And so behavioral monitoring is a very, very important aspect of what we do with our animals. So having every individual interact with the cat on a daily basis is actually really important because though I may not notice something, one of our other staff members may that she didn't show to me. And so we don't have anybody that's assigned to a specific animal. Again, some people have better relationship with animals. Again, there's a lot of times I don't interact with Harry much just because Harry's not my biggest fan, but that's something that we have to learn and understand as we work here.
Aaron asked if we can if they can sponsor Banshee online.
So that is in the works. We will be getting those sponsors up as soon as we can. But you can always go on and donate on our website or donate even right now through our Facebook posts that we're doing right now. But you can always go to our website and donate one time or choose to become a monthly donation. You can choose monthly donations as well for any amount that you choose.
Deanna asked how easy it is for them to get sick.
So, fortunately, these cats are very resilient animals. Again, they are still a wild animal at the end of the day, and they are able to fight off a lot of illnesses and things that may even are much heavier affected on domestic animals. But especially as they get older, as they age, you're going to see more problems start to develop. And so we do keep a very close eye on our cats, work very, very closely with our veterinarian to ensure we understand exactly what's going on with our animals. But it is something that each cat's a little different. Everyone has their own kind of resiliency, and some cats we will never see sick. Other cats seem to have a few more issues here and there, but they are, for the most part, a pretty resilient animal.
So my question was earlier when she was dragging her bum on the ground, what was that about?
So that's something we pay attention to. Again, a lot like the dogs that you'll see, that can be a sign of parasites, things of that nature. If that is the case, we'll do a fecal sample for her, and if she has worms or something like that, we'll deworm her, much like you do with your domestic animals. Could just be that she's letting you know that's her territory and was kind of marking it a little bit. So we'll probably go in, if we do see her doing that more frequently, go in and get a fecal for her just to make sure that nothing's going on as far as health-wise. But it's kind of hard to tell what she was doing.
Laura Lynn asked how old Banshee is and how long have we had her.
So again, Banshee, I will honestly have to look. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe Banshee is about 13 to 14 years old. And we have had Banshee since 2008, I believe is correct. Again, it's one of those things that when you don't think about it every day, you can kind of forget about it.
Deanna asked, have the climbing cats ever tried to escape?
Fortunately, no. Again, all of our cats that do have the ability to climb all have a roof on their enclosure, so their enclosures are roofed in, which it completely eliminates any chance of Banshee climbing out of her enclosure. with our cats, again, they are an animal that is very territorial, but at the same time, they are very lazy. They are a very energy-conserving animal, and Banshee understands that she gets food here every day. This is her main place. She has a nice place to sleep in her bedroom back in the back. So for her, there's no real reason to go anywhere. She likes to kind of hang out, and she knows that we're going to kind of pamper her and cater to her every need whenever she needs it.
So Angie said, we're your neighbors, and it seems like the roaring is almost on a regular schedule, morning and evening. Are those the feeding times?
Nope. So typically what you're hearing, those are going to be our lions. The lions do a noise called caroling, which can be heard upwards of 5 miles away. So when they get going, you can really hear them a long ways out. Again, that is their morning, evening. Most of these cats do act within that crepuscular sleeping or activity pattern, meaning that they're active at dawn and dusk. And so typically that's just when they're waking up or kind of waking up in the morning, and that's when they're awake during the afternoon or in the evening. The rest of the day they're pretty much sleeping, so that's why you don't hear it much after that. But that's just typically their typical activity pattern.
Laura asked why Banshee was licking the fence.
So there's probably a little meat residue left from when I was giving her snacks. She likes to try to find every last little bit she can.
So if there are any more questions, jump on and ask them. Patsy wants to know this is from Michael. Patsy wants to know how social are mountain lions in the wild.
So mountain lions, again, are a completely solitary organism outside of breeding season, where the males and females will come together for a short period of time. And if females have cubs, that is typically the only time you will see them interacting with each other. Here's
my question. When you mentioned earlier that they make noises such as screaming, what do you mean by that?
So mountain lions have a very, if you've ever heard it in the wild, is a very unnerving sound. It does sound very much like a human female screaming. Basically, it is one of their mating noises that they will make. Banshee does not do it anymore due to her being spayed. Neither does Tiki, as she is spayed. But it's a pretty unsettling noise once you've heard it once. But they'll do it typically in the evening, and it does sound a little weird.
Deanna wants to know if Banshee's ever got stung by a bee or a wasp.
I imagine she has probably run into one or two in her lifetime. I've never seen her interact very heavily. Again, that is something we will pay very close attention to. We do see a lot of wasp nests get built around the sanctuary, and we'll try to remove them as quickly as possible, just so our cats don't have any problem with those. But again, they do live outside, so you do see lots of insects interacting with them, things of that nature. So I imagine she may have run into one or two, but we keep a close eye on her habitat to make sure that nothing is being constructed we don't want in there.
Laura Lynn's 10-year-old daughter wants to know what she does when it rains and if she likes it.
Banshee is not a big fan of rain. Unlike our tigers, Banshee is a cat that when it is raining, she is usually back in her bedroom sleeping in her igloo. But she typically tries to avoid it. Again, most of her bedroom area is all roofed over, so it is kind of sheltered from the rain. But she typically tries to hang out in her igloo during the raining period.
Stacy wants to know what her favorite food is.
Again, not much of a favorite for Banshee, just as much of it as she can get a hold of, basically. She is not a very picky cat.
Erin wants to know, when she was privately owned, did she live inside the house or was she in an outdoor pen?
She was in an outdoor enclosure, and that is one of the reasons we think Banshee had a little easier time adapting to the sanctuary, is that her ownership was actually in a very positive manner. Again, private ownership always does have its issues, but she had a very similar enclosure to what we see here. And fortunately, that allowed her to adapt a lot easier to the sanctuary than some of the cats that have lived their entire lives indoors.
Stacy wants to know, how much meat does she consume and what would that be equivalent in eating for humans?
So Banshee eats a much smaller amount than you might expect. Banshee typically eats about 2 pounds of food a day. Again, we do have her on a pretty strict diet. She's not a cat that gets as much food as I think she would like to eat on a daily basis. Again, being an opportunist, a generalist predator, in the wild, she's going to hunt any game she can. Again, she may be hunting a rabbit every day, or if she was able to take down a larger prey item like a deer, that's going to satiate her for a week, longer than that. As far as a human goes, if you're thinking, Banshee is probably about 100 pounds, so even similar to that of a small female human. So 2 pounds of food, obviously, it's probably not going to be equivalent to what we would eat on a daily basis, just depending on different appetites, depending on what you like. But it's hard to really equate that, just because, again, we do have some dietary issues with Banshee.
I think that's about it. If we didn't get a chance to answer questions, we'll always try to hop on and answer them later, and so will Sam.
Alrighty, guys. Well, we are going to wrap it up then for Banshee and the other cats that are here at the sanctuary. We'd like to thank you guys for joining us once again. Next week, we actually don't have a set animal yet. We actually will have a poll up on our Facebook for a selection of animals that you guys can actually help us decide which animals you guys would like to hear about next week. So make sure you do jump back on our Facebook and respond to that poll so we know who to talk about next week. But again, thank you for joining us. Again, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media outlets, and share this with your friends to ensure that we continue raising awareness and educating people about these big cats and keeping you guys a little entertained during this period of kind of self-isolation.